Even though yesterday's session, if you followed along, it wasn't that hard in terms of volume or intensity. The workout was enough to drive me down into feeling pretty crappy today. So like I said, it was a few days ago, I did a really voluminous leg session, and one thing I didn't account for is I'm still at a point where I am lifting very well below my true potential for lower body training. So when I do like a 2-hour session, it's not going balls to the walls, smashing every single work set. What I'm doing is just gently accruing volume and more work sets and more practice under the bar, because I'm learning and practicing new breathing and bracing patterns to help with my tightness in the bottom position of the squat. However, as I'm doing that, I actually am still obviously getting stronger. I'm taxing my nervous system, trying out new neural pathways, and I am lifting heavier weights each week, and it's pretty big jumps because I got the confidence for it, because I know it's well below what I could do. So for example, last week I was doing just 80 kilos for about 10 sets on safety bar squats, whereas this week I went up to about 120 kilos. So it's a 40 kilo jump. Now, that's because it's still well beneath what I could do, but I have to still respect the fact that it is still a significant jump, and that sort of jump, that sort of loading increments is significant for the nervous system and for recovery. Anyway, I knew yesterday coming into train that even though I felt pretty good, that I was on the cusp of overreaching a little bit too much, which is why I've preemptively programmed that day in the way I did yesterday. But even still, that was enough to push me back a little bit, and I'm waking up today feeling a little bit more sluggish. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that I am overreaching a little bit, and that I do need to factor that in with my food intake. So I probably need to push in more calories over the next week, increase my carbs more for recovery, and get a little bit more rest outside of the gym to make sure that I can keep progressing. So luckily today is just shoulders and arms, and I'm still hitting, again, pretty low on the rep scheme, around 3 to 5 reps for multiple sets, just to accrue some of that nervous system stimulus and that activation that will carry over to more voluminous work in the future when I change things up a little bit more. But this is still just, this session, again, it's going to be heavier loading. It's going to be explosive work with still controlled tempos, but the fact is it's still beneath, it's still not going to be completely pushing the envelope. There's going to be maybe 5 or 6 total top hard heavy sets, which is not a lot, so it's enough to just stimulate but don't annihilate. But again, this sort of training, it doesn't mean I'm going to half-ass it. I'm still going to be pushing as hard as I can, trying to generate as much of a response as possible. So before we get into today's workout, what I want you guys to do is just comment below and tell me, what do you guys do pre-workout? What do you guys do if you're not feeling like training? Do you still go anyway? Do you skip the gym? What is your thought process? And if you're taking any supplements or pre-workout aids, ergogenic aids, tell me, let me know. So today, rosemary. This will be my savior. Essential oil. So I just dab a little bit under my nostrils. Rosemary has a compound in it called rosmarinic acid. Pretty sure. Anyway, it's a big nasal decongestant for one thing, which is awesome. Opens up the nasal passageways, improves respiration, improves breathing, but it's also stimulatory for the nervous system. I can't remember which channel it actually works on, but it will improve focus, training drive, and attention. So I don't use it all the time. There is not any down-regulatory effects of it, but so I could use it every time, but I just forget to. I don't feel it necessary. I've had my dark chocolate, got the rosemary, and it's time to train. Starting with some overhead presses today, some heavy standing presses. So to warm myself up, I'm doing some high pulls, some hang cleans, a bit of overhead pressing. There's no real set sequence here. I'm just going through a few movements that feel good to wake up the entire back, from the base of my neck down towards my lower back and my shoulders. Doing this over about 5 to 10 minutes. And in between that, I was doing some isometrics, as you can see here, where I'm just standing against the rack and externally and internally rotating with a very, very gentle intensity. Maybe about a 3 or 4 out of 10 contraction there, just to wake things up through those infraspinatus and subscapularis. Now, in terms of how many sets you should do, I did about 5 or 6, but I typically do as many as I need to feel that area waking up, and you should feel the contraction intensifying and your shoulder feeling a whole lot more stable. That is your cue that you've done enough and those regions are now awake, and you can go commence your lifting. So with the lifting, you'll see here that I'm cleaning the first rep up with a muscle clean, which means minimal body motion. You'll see I do let there be a little bit more motion as the sets progress. But my simple rule is if I can't clean that up, I'm not going to try pressing it for these first few sets anyway, as I ramp up in sets of 5. Simply because I want to maintain some sort of structural balance and stability and proprioception of my back and my core, and the way that that integrates and harmonizes itself with overhead pressing. Too many people get really, really strong with specific movements, especially in a seated position, and they have no strength and no stability when you get them standing up or when you get them doing more complex movements. So this is a great way to iron out those deficiencies and keep things honest. So I worked up in sets of 5 using the muscle clean into the press, and once I hit that weight, I'll rack the weight and I keep going up. So I do increments now, but I'm not going through the clean, and I'm just doing sets of 3. Things are properly warmed up. Now I can start shifting some heavier weights and trying to generate more force production through my delts, because it is important to be shifting weights that allow you to progressively overload and challenge your body, especially the shoulders, which don't really see that much of attention with heavy lifting. Typically, it's a lot of density and reps, which I'm not against, but there is also a time and place to be doing heavy explosive work like push presses and overhead presses. Okay, next up is dips. I did these paired with some single arm dumbbell preacher curls. I like to use dips as one of my main base building exercises, particularly over close grip bench pressing, which is what most people would go to for tricep building. Now, the thing that dips offer that the tricep benching or close grip benching wouldn't is freedom of motion at the scapula, which helps integrate a lot more of the serratus. Now, what that will do long term is if you build up that strength and have that freedom, it will promote shoulder health. It will promote proper strength through the serratus, proper articulation of the shoulder blade, the scapula, which is really, really important long term when we're looking at building strength. A lot of people can get really, really strong doing close grip bench pressing, but long term they end up developing a lot of overuse injuries from pinning down the scapula all the time without letting them move and get strong in a more fluid range of motion. So with the dumbbell curls, I was doing these between every set of dips and just focusing on isolating that muscle, taking it through a full range of motion. You'll see as I fatigue, I go into some paused eccentrics. So I rip the weight up with my opposite hand and pause on the way down. I aim for a couple of seconds at each interval, aiming for 2 or 3 pauses on the way back down, doing a couple of reps just to add that extra intensity. So you'll notice that I am staying in a pretty low rep scheme here. I was hitting about 4 to 6 reps by the end of it on these curls. So just to add a little bit extra time on the tension while still staying in that heavier rep scheme and letting me use a heavy weight, adding in those forced eccentrics with the isometrics is a fantastic way to do this. Also, having that eccentric and that pause specifically on the way down does help to build a lot of reactive strength through in the bicep tendons, which is really, really important long term to help you from preventing you from snapping them, which I think is pretty important. So back to dips in between each set of the curls. Just showing you a side view here so you can see the range of motion. You'll see them getting down as low as possible till the bicep touches the forearm. Stay within your own active range, obviously, but you do want to strive for a full range of motion. Now, I was working in sets of 5 and just ramping the weight up. And on this last set here, things felt really, really good. So I just did a bit of a YOLO set and repped out as much as I could. Do as I say, not as I do in this regard, because dips are one of those exercises that can be a little bit more aggressive on the shoulders. So you don't necessarily want to tax them all the time, but you know, if it's feeling good and you've got healthy shoulders, push the envelope every now and then. Finishing up, and I guess you could say tying everything together. I don't even know what you would call this exercise. I've just thrown it in as bicep shoulder complex. There isn't a set rule here, okay? I think one really important thing to go back to is that it's very, very easy to get strong in isolation, particularly for the arms, for shoulders, biceps, triceps. However, we've got to understand and respect the fact that all of those muscle groups and all the muscle groups in your entire body, they were designed to work in harmony, in synergy with one another. They were meant to integrate and work fluidly together through many different, more complex movement patterns, not just staying in one plane of motion to your side or to the front of your body. So taking the body through something more complex like this is a very, very good way to not just create a disgustingly disgusting pump and flush of blood through the muscles, but it's also a really, really good way to keep things healthy, particularly through the shoulder joint. That is one that is always getting banged up. Shoulders and elbows are the common complaints that I deal with clients, and I find it's through becoming too good on pure isolation work and not doing enough of these kinds of fluid motions that are more, I guess, athletic in nature, that take the body through different positions. So a quick cueing here, going through some sort of curl motion or some sort of lateral raise motion to begin with, dipping the elbows down and then putting it into an overhead fly. From there, you'll see here as I'm fatiguing, I'm going into that just lateral, dropping the elbows and reversing into an excessively externally rotated dumbbell curl. Finished off with some more hammer curls. I forgot about those. But here, there's no real set rule. I'm chasing a pump, I'm chasing some blood flow, just to finish everything off after focusing on the heavy work. As much as I love doing heavy-based lifting, I think it's really, really important and overlooked for arm training. I do like to end things with some sort of a bro pump at the end of the workout, but I do think there is some merit to it in terms of keeping things healthy and keeping things moving properly. And finishing off, as always, with some sort of downshifting, pushing myself back into some sort of parasympathetic state. Shoulder extension stretching with a bit of a fascial twist here. So try to get your pinkies touching behind you, shoulder blades pinned back and down, chest up. Drop yourself down into the stretch. Now you'll see me, along with pulling ridiculous faces, I am twisting my body, moving my legs, my limbs, rotating my head, rolling my neck and my head around as well. This is to accentuate and help to highlight those fascial meridians that run through our bodies, tying all the muscle groups together. We're not looking at stretching one individual muscle, we're looking at stretching the entire fascial line to improve mobility and to improve blood flow. Now, through this stretch, and any stretch really, when you are holding a stretch, you are putting a lot of tension and pressure on the muscle, and you're sticking and occluding a lot of blood in the area. So once you come out of it, you'll get this humongous super compensatory rush of blood to the muscle, which feels absolutely delicious. You'll see there. Now, did a couple of sets here, and that was it.
I am so glad that session is over. So, if we're looking at this by the numbers in terms of progress, session wasn't that great. So how did things go today? If we're going to track things by the numbers as a pure gauge of performance, trying to like beat the logbook kind of thing, Today's session was so-so. I managed to maintain the same sort of strength that I've done in the last couple of rotations with these exercises. So that might be seen as a time to start rotating things, which is actually what I'm going to do. It is time to switch out some of those exercises because I feel like I've gotten all that I can out of them at the moment. And if I kept pushing things, I'm probably going to risk accruing some sort of overuse injuries or tendonitis, or just getting to a point where I'm hitting failure and I start compensating with other muscle groups. So it is time to switch things up. However, I want you guys to keep in mind the fact that you shouldn't just be using strength or the logbook or progressive overload in terms of the sheer numbers and strength as your mainstay determinant of whether or not you continue with a certain exercise or program or whatever it might be. Because the good thing about today is, even though I was pretty damn run down from the training, the good thing is those movements felt the best I've ever felt in a long time. Doing those muscle cleans into the presses felt really stable and strong through the upper back and through my shoulder girdle. Not that I've had any bad pains there, but I have felt unstable and relatively weak in the past. But it's at a point now where things just feel good. Same as the dips. So again, I've done more weight in the past and I've done more reps in the past, but today was the best that I've ever felt. Now, that tells me that I've progressed through this phase, not just in terms of strength, but it tells me that I've progressed in terms of my motor unit recruitment, in terms of my neuromuscular efficiency, in my stability through the scapula and the shoulder, particularly around like the AC joint or the subscapularis. I've got a lot more strength there, which is going to translate to better performance in other movements. So I spoke a little bit about why I didn't use a close grip press through this phase instead of a dip. Now I'm at a point where I could probably start to incorporate a close grip bench press and get more out of it and get no aggravation through the shoulders, and I'll be able to stick with that for a decent amount of time to add some size back onto my triceps. So overall, pretty good workout. As much as I am wiped from it, I do feel a little bit better than when I started the workout, which is a good sign that my body is still able to pump out the required hormones to support energy production and focus. But keep in mind that won't always be the case. And if you do go into the gym feeling like crap and then training doesn't lift up your performance and doesn't lift up your mood or elevate things at all, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. Most of the time it would be. But if you're doing a specific phase of training where you are trying to push yourself into that deep ditch of overreaching and overtraining, that can be a good thing to feel like that for a little while, knowing that you are planning on pulling back and super compensating, getting that big surge in recovery and growth, fat loss, whatever your goal is. But for me, during this phase, I don't want that. I want to be at a point where I get fatigued, but I should still have enough metabolic reserve. I should have enough energy to recover and bounce back from my training. So for this session to come out of it feeling good and feeling better than when I came into it, that's a good sign. So I was planning on doing some rack pulls tomorrow, but I'm gonna give it a miss. I'm gonna give it another day to completely recover. I'm gonna eat up properly. And again, it's not about looking at the localized soreness in my arms, which I really won't have that much because I didn't do anything too stressful or damaging to it, or to the fascia. But what I'm looking at here is neurological performance. I know I've got a lot of heavy sets on rack pulls coming up in my next session, and I've got a lot of heavy posterior chain work, which is always taxing on the nervous system because you need that cacophony of simultaneous recruitment of so many muscles. It is very fatiguing. So I want to make sure that I'm coming into that session completely fresh, so I can then do that session and dip myself back down, but it won't be dipping myself down into such a deep ditch of debt in terms of recovery. Whereas if I was to train tomorrow, I'd still get through the workout and I'd still improve and perform all right, but I'd be more worried about what would happen in the day after or 2 days after that, and when you compound that with the rest of my training. So it's better off for me to have that day off tomorrow, eat up, relax, sleep, and get back into the gym later. I really hope you guys are enjoying this series of training logs. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these in the future. Probably just going to try to aim to get 2 to 3 videos up per week. What I would really love to hear from you guys is some of the things that you want to see more of. Do you want to see more warm-ups? Do you want to see more mobility drills? Do you want to see what I do for my cooldowns? Do you want to look more into my nutrition around training? Just let me know in the comments below and I'll get through them and we'll get back to you. Please don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to the channel as well, so you can stay up to date with when I do upload new videos and new content. And I'll see you next time.